Jared Leto here, aka Dr. Michael Morbius, and you are listening to A Stark Contrast, hosted by some guy named Geoffrey and my old friend, the one and only Dai.
Hello and welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. And we are your hosts, Geoffrey
and Dai.
Welcome back.
Welcome back,
everybody. Oh my gosh.
So, Jeff, Coachella, Ella.
Oh, guys.
That's coming down from the high.
If you can hear it in my voice at all throughout this episode.
I'm telling you, you seem very resilient.
I just got back from Coachella. We're recording on a Tuesday, so Monday I got back. And yeah, it was my first one too. So my body is beat the hell up. It was probably the most...
You survived.
Yeah, but it was probably the most physically taxing thing I've ever done.
That's wild. but worth it.
It was fun. It was fun.
Worth it.
The group you go with really matters. So I'm glad I got to go with the people I did go with.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a great time. Really a once in a lifetime type of experience. So
I've never been. I probably never will. But I very vicariously lived through you. So
yeah. Honestly, the next time I do go, if I do go,
mm-hmm.
I'll probably would want to work at it in some
mm-hmm.
capacity, since I work in the music industry.
Yeah.
Concert industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather just
yeah. I feel like even getting a taste of the backstage, it kind of ruins you for being a traditional attendee.
Sure.
And then you just want to do that the entire time. But
sure.
also
because I'm such a chill person. I hate
exactly.
I like just cooling off, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then running from stage to stage. I'm on opposite sides of the festival grounds. You're kind of just guys, what are we doing here?
Did you check how many steps you took this weekend?
Oh, I haven't, but I think my girlfriend did at some point, and I think it was at least minimal at 15,000 steps already.
Woo!
Yeah.
So
it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
But
that's good.
it's fun.
Yeah. You know what else is fun, Jeff?
What is it?
Having a 1-year anniversary of the show.
God. Oh my God. It's 1 year old.
To the day.
I know.
To the day.
That's funny.
So, dear friends, if you didn't notice, on Instagram, we actually just shared it. But apparently, and we didn't know this before recording today, but we started this show technically a year ago today on April 19th, 2021. And here we are a literal year after recording our 27th episode.
Insane.
Isn't that crazy?
I know.
How fun.
How far we've come production wise, but then just or our growth now and how many characters we've covered.
Yeah.
Oh man. And if you're still listening from that first episode to now, we love you. We thank you for all this support. Dai and I love doing this as much as we have own personal stuff going on, our own jobs, day-to-day jobs, but and doing this on the side really helps it break it apart and do something fresh and new and still make it fun as hell to do it.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on the journey. So I guess we can dive into some stuff before the episodes.
Speaking of the weekend,
other
things.
The artists or the weekend.
Oh yeah, well that too. But speaking of this past weekend, one thing did drop.
Yes,
right.
And the teaser trailer for Thor: Love and Thunder.
Finally.
Okay, so let's have a quick talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I genuinely, like I said before, did not expect it to drop. I thought maybe they would just serve it at the end as a stinger for Doctor Strange, like they did with Spider-Man, and it was just going to come out like that because, let's be honest, the timeline, at least for marketing purposes, is so tight right now, and you see it. You see it in the last 48 hours. They're really starting to jump all over each other. they've got Moon Knight going.
Yeah.
They're doing the Multiverse of Madness stuff. Then they dropped Thor, and then today Ms. Marvel stuff. I was going to say,
they just dropped the promo poster for Ms. Marvel. Yeah.
Right. So now they're in that weird crunch time that we kind of saw, I think, in 2020 or 2021. Sure, yes,
when they were packing everything all in.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like the Loki thing.
Yeah.
I
mean, you gotta throw it in somewhere, right? Yeah. Might as well.
Yeah. So first impressions on the trailer.
Oh, well, not the child, but the song they used.
Oh.
Sweet Child of Mine, right?
Guns N' Roses.
I was just like
iconic.
I was like, what a friggin' perfect. I don't know. It just fit well because we know it's Taika Waititi, and with Thor's kind of like new kind of persona that kind of came after Ragnarok.
Yeah.
So it was just like it made sense. It felt right.
Yeah. And I love that, of course, because I have special preference for this film. I already do, because the Guardians are in it.
That's
and
true.
So it says Guardians of the
They
Galaxy.
look different too. Quill
and they
looks
look different.
so different.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
it's neat to, once again, we kind of talked about this in Eternals, but the fact that music is playing a part in kind of setting the tone for the film.
Yeah.
Because I as much, like Taika used, what is it? What's the song called again? I'm already forgetting.
The Immigrant Song?
Yeah, the Immigrant Song. I was about to do it. Did you hear that? Even though Taika did that, I feel like choosing a band like Guns N' Roses in that specific era of that band really kind of marries the Thor feel with Guardians. And it's not quite stepping on James Gunn's territory.
Yeah, because it's totally
Yeah.
different, but in the same cut from the same cloth.
It's cut from the same. Yeah, and you're just like, okay, it's really setting a tone. I'm getting the vibe, and then of course, like, so if you haven't seen it, it's chock full of comic book like canon like throwbacks, like literal panels of comic books.
I saw that there was one
trailer.
panel that people put on Twitter. I'm
With
sure
the beast in the snow.
It's literally
Yeah.
the exact same.
It's the same panel.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And a lot of the characters from the Thor lore even make a small fragment of a cameo in that teaser. So I was just like, wow. So they're really packing it on.
There's a lot.
And then the Guardians on top of that. And then Jane Foster as Thor herself. She looks so good.
Bro, she is jacked. Holy.
Dude. And this is why she's been hiding for like a year up until the Oscars. Like I think the Oscars were the first time she'd really stepped out.
Yeah.
And was back in the public eye because she's already shed the muscle. But she looks freaking incredible. I'm ready to see her.
Dude, her arms are like bigger than my head. Holy crap.
And Natalie Portman's a small lady. She's
yeah,
petite.
exactly.
So it's like, oh man, she must have gained so much like muscle weight for that, muscle mass.
I know.
I just can't
She
wait.
looks great on like the costume, the suit looks good.
It looks exactly the way it should. Well, not should, but it looks very much like the comics. And so I can't wait to see like the thing that they do really well with Thor is the intricate detail of
and then
the armor and so
Mjolnir. It's I noticed that it was reconstructed.
It's reconstructed
from when Hela broke it. Yeah. And I'm like, that's interesting. I'm curious to see how that goes.
Right, exactly. So there's putting the pieces together, and so we'll see where that goes. Super hyped. Yeah. Can't wait. And then speaking of Ms. Marvel, so we just got that teaser poster or payoff poster. I guess it's a payoff poster because it's everybody. Officially less than 2 months away, 50 days today, according to Marvel, and so probably
that's right. Yes,
43 by the time this drops, but that's kind of amazing.
Insane.
And then we have Moon Knight at its halfway point. And episode 4 will be out by the time this podcast episode drops. And so from what we hear, 4 is like the big one, the one that really blows everybody's minds.
Yeah.
So that'll set course for the finale for that show. And so I think Moon Knight finishes when we're about to have our next mini Marvel. So So maybe we'll do a decompression of or a post-mortem of that series.
Yeah.
Because it's getting crazy.
Episode 4 is tonight midnight as we're recording. So
I'm gonna stay up this time.
Are you gonna stay up?
I'm gonna stay up. There's no point. Like, I might as well. Right. Okay. I'm so excited. And then, of course, the next time you hear from us, it'll be Multiverse of Madness time.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Oh,
it's gonna be good.
I am. Oh
yeah.
gosh.
So Jeff and I are going to the fan event at the El Capitan.
Woo!
It's gonna be a good time because Jeff's never done one of these things.
Never.
I promise you. And we're gonna have this discussion after we see it. But crowd, genuinely, make or break. It makes or breaks the film experience, and you're gonna have such a good time.
I kind of can't wait to see everyone's like costumes and everything.
I know, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
cosplays and everything. Yeah,
maybe you can wear your crown. Yeah.
God, I hope it. I haven't got a shipping confirmation email. I think maybe the 26th or something.
Unless I score the ears.
Oh, okay, that too. Oh,
yes.
So excited.
So I don't know if you want to say anything, but I've again staying true to my purity of not seeing footage.
I'm just so ready to see it already at this point.
Let's go. It's almost here. 2 more weeks. So I guess with that, I mean, we can kind of jump into it, huh?
Let's jump into the man himself.
So as a reminder, we are not experts. We do not claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. So comments, questions, concerns, please feel free to shout out on social or write us. Yeah. And with that, this also may include spoilers from Morbius.
So if you haven't watched it, go watch it before you listen to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we are going in on it.
We're going in on today's character study, Dr. Michael Morbius. So huge character from the Spider-Man lore and gallery of rogues, sort of, kind of. Jeff and I kind of mentioned this in a previous episode. Is he a villain? Is he an anti-hero?
Anti-hero.
He's kind of, I don't know. I don't really know what to call him. I guess he's kind of in the middle of that. And he has been a hero in other respects. But let's dive into it. So created by Roy Thomas and Gil Kane. Morbius's first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man number 101, October 1971. This is actually pretty cool because if you've seen the film, or for instance, you'll see on Michael Morbius's chalkboard or what have you in the film, there's an Easter egg for the issue. And so there's all these formulas and science writing, and under a specific list it has all these equations, and one of them says ASM 101. Ooh. And I was like, oh, I see what you did there. Nice.
Nice.
So
Love
that's
that.
there. Yeah. But yeah, so the highest grade of this particular comic book on eBay was a 9.6.
Whoa.
Pretty good for a 1971 book. And there was one specifically signed by Stan Lee and John Romita.
There it is.
And I don't know if you've looked at this sheet yet, Jeff, but that comic book, that copy of the book, signed by Stan, signed by John Romita, who is a gigantic influence on comic books in general, $25,000.
Oh my jeez.
And if you will, I have the original cover here pulled up. And if you see the top corner, 15 cents at the time of publishing. Imagine that. So if you liked vampires in 1971,
15 cents to $25,000.
$25,000. Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know if that one was graded. I think it was. But yeah, at a 9.6 with 2 cigs.
That's a lot.
Ooh, $25,000. And then a standard one, no signatures, is about $16,500. It's so crazy.
I mean, I'll still take it.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
So if you had 2 copies of it, like, let's just say, because like some collectors like myself, you'll buy more than 1 copy.
Yeah.
If you can afford to, and get them graded and to do whatever. And so say some Vampire Morbius fan bought 2 copies of this issue, because they're like, ooh, Spider-Man 101.
Yeah.
Why not? And then they got them graded. Those 2 books alone.
A lot.
$40,000.
It's a brand new car right there. Like, geez.
That's some people's like annual wage.
I know.
That's
God.
so nuts to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's bring it back. Is this film like your true first like knowing about Morbius as a character.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Really? So you hadn't anywhere. You hadn't.
No, I can't say that I can hit it on the nose.
Really?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Whoa. So that must have been a little trippy for you.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Because, full disclosure without disclosing everything is that Jeff and I both actually worked for Jared Leto for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I did especially.
Yeah.
You, how long were you there?
No, I think my last year there was 2015.
And you started
2014.
so you're with us at least for a year.
Yeah, it was for a year. It was
cool.
at least for a year.
Yeah.
But I think when I came on, it was when he was in the thick of Suicide Squad stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think it was
Green
after
hair,
that where he started getting in talks with Morbius and everything.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. Wow. So I can't imagine your surprise when you're like, oh, cool, another Spider-Man. Wait, what? And it ended up being Jared.
It was so crazy. Just like, he's in a Marvel movie. I was like, great.
That's cool.
Good for you.
Right? Wild. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was like many of the incidents on this show. I think aside having the trading cards, the 90s Amazing Spider-Man cartoon is kind of what did it for me. He had quite a bit of screen time on that show.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it a little later, but yeah, he was interesting because he had some of the things that they adapted for the character in animation were very, very vampire-like. Very. Like he would stand or he would like be upside down with his arms crossed, and he had a very thick accent that was almost like Transylvanian, even though the character's from Greece.
Yeah.
And it was like pretty tropey. Like it was like, oh, Spider-Man, I'm here. Just like, you know what I mean?
Like very like Dracula.
Yes,
like,
very Dracula. Like,
okay.
Just to kind of gain the crowd by the familiarity of it. But let's see. I didn't look at the backs of these, but here are some trading cards. And you'll see like this character is very, he's like black, white, and red. And he looks, I don't know if you're familiar with Lobo at all, but there's a DC character, now DC character named Lobo. They've got some similarities, at least when it comes to the face and the coloration.
Yeah.
But as you see, he is a vampire.
He's a vampire. That's a for sure thing.
Yeah. And so let's see. I'll read this one. 1992 Marvel Superheroes. Let's get into this. Desperately searching for a cure for a fatal blood disease, Nobel Prize-winning biologist Dr. Michael Morbius succeeded, but at a terrible price. To his horror, he found himself transformed into a living vampire, driven to drink human blood to survive. Now, having sworn to never again drink the blood of innocent victims, he prowls the night, stalking the guilty to slake his inhuman thirst.
Jeez, that's dark.
Well, first things first, I've never heard the word slake in my life until this card. But yeah, I mean, he's a quite dark character. And we kind of mentioned this in the Moon Knight episode, for instance, like Werewolf by Night. This is kind of the era that they're introducing these more notorious, like Hollywood monsters type of characters.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they introduced werewolf, and then now they're having Dracula, I think, had already been introduced by this point as well, or he just came in, and now they're introducing this character, which is not Dracula at all. He's almost like a antithesis of Dracula.
Yeah,
in some
I think
ways.
that's what it looks like they're trying to do, like create like a vampire character, but like not Dracula.
Yeah. And also like very distinctly like he doesn't want to hurt people. And he's not seeking to hurt people.
Love that conflict.
Yeah, it's a great conflict for sure. But yeah, so I mean, it's kind of well said there. Very similar to what we see in the films.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we can kind of jump into it on as far as my notes go. So yeah, he was a not Peace Prize, but Nobel Prize winning biologist specializing in field of human and animal biology. And he also had a degree in hematology, which is the study of blood, which essentially is because he has this rare blood disease. And so it's interesting because they never quite ever say what it is. Like they never say.
Yes.
He's got a blood disease, but like they don't identify it. Yeah.
Name.
Yeah. And so he has this, rare blood disease that in the books, he's trying all these experiments to try and treat himself, but they all come to, unfortunate failure. Until this one, procedure that he's able to kind of follow through with, and he transforms into this vampire-like being. And so the thing about Morbius in the comic books very distinctly is that they regard him as, even though it says the living vampire all over the place, he is regarded as a pseudo vampire.
Oh, okay.
Because he's not necessarily a full-fledged vampire, if that makes any sense. Like, he wasn't bred of like, oh, he got bit and he got the enzymes. So he's turning
into like,
It's like he didn't get the blood.
Yeah,
like, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
He was transformed by his own means in some ways by a vampire bat and like all of those genetic anomalies.
Yes.
But like a real vampire, Morbius needs to drink blood to survive. And unfortunately, after drinking the victim's blood, his mind returns to normal. Then he's like, oh God, what did I do?
Okay.
So that happens a lot in the books. And Marvel cites this, like, the come down from the high as fraught with guilt, remorse, and self-loathing. So he's like... he's really like the OG, like, goth boy in some ways. Like, he's just...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, despite being one of the world's foremost experts on biochemistry and hematology, Morbius is still unable to cure himself. Like that's another thing that he just goes through, through the comics, and it's kind of like he almost embraces it. But as much as he embraces being a pseudo vampire, he's also like, God, I wish this was over.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah.
Right.
You kind of see that in the movie.
Yeah,
a little
you kind of
bit,
do.
Yeah.
And speaking of the film, in the SSU, we're taking it back to the SSU, which is Sony Spider-Man Universe. Morbius, 2022, portrayed by Jared Leto and Charlie Shotwell as a child. So we see two iterations of this character in the film, directed by Daniel Espinosa. Executive producers. This is the one and only time I'm going to say this because we never say producers ever. But because we know them personally,
we do.
And Emma's been really great to me. With this film, executive producers Jared Leto, Emma Ludbrook, and Louise Rosner. Screenplay by Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless. Composed by John Ekstrand.
Yeah, shout out to Emma, man.
Yeah, shout out to Emma.
She gave me my first shot, so
yeah, that's that right. Was that like your first big
that
thing?
was my first like kind of like big,
industry.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like in college. I remember just emailing
Yeah, you were
with her.
a baby.
Yeah, I remember when she emailed me, like, so Emma Ludbrook, like, hey, so you want to like be like we heard you're interested in being an intern, and like, that was like my first instance of contact with Emma, not knowing like
what it
who
was
she really was,
Yeah,
you know, and I'm just like, whoa, you know,
Now she's EP on this
I know.
film. Yeah, she's been like hustling for as long as I've known her, and she gave me a great shot
great.
too.
She's
so,
amazing.
Yeah, so thanks, Emma. So the crazy thing about this film, first and foremost, of the stack of things that people could possibly say, is that the trailer itself debuted more than 2
years ago.
Yes. So you gotta remember,
that
folks,
blew my mind.
This movie was like the trailer dropped in January of 2020.
Yes.
Okay, pre-pandemic, kind of like the beginnings of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then for it to then get delayed and suffer as many delays and as much stalling as New Mutants and Wonder Woman 84.
That's right.
Both, like all three of these films just got they just got run over with delays, but finally came out.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. And Emma was nice enough to invite me to the premiere. And that was like surreal in so many ways.
Yeah.
Just to kind of go from this like kind of brainstorming stage of like, oh yeah, what character could Jared play if he ever played a Marvel character? And it, like actually being on the
landed
whiteboard.
on Morbius.
Yeah, like just a few of us just being like, Morbius would be an interesting one. And then to actually see, years later, like, oh my God, here he is. He's in the flesh as his character. And I'll say it again. I think if he was going to play anybody, this is the perfect character for him. And we asked on social media, in fact, how many people were planning to see the film in theaters. A resounding 83% said yes.
Yeah.
And then the remaining, whatever percentage were like, yeah, eventually. But it was good to know that people were at least
excited
interested.
for it.
Yeah, they're very interested in this film. And so for the curious, because I'm not sure how long it's going to be in theaters. It maybe has a couple of weeks, maybe a month more. Yeah. But the film is actually currently streaming digitally on Roku. And then it'll be, because of the deals that they've made, it'll be streaming on Netflix after that. Oh. And then if you're waiting for Disney Plus, don't. Just go out and watch it. Because it's not coming to Disney Plus until 2026.
Is that when the Sony stuff is coming
That's
out?
what I was wondering. I was like, does that mean Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man are not coming to Disney Plus until 26? But I'm not sure.
Oh, that's an insane amount of
That's
years.
a long time. Yeah, it's a long time.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it might be. Honestly,
okay, yeah,
it might be.
might as well.
Yeah, you might as well just go watch it in theaters and check it out. Listener comment from Leanne771 on Instagram. It was entertaining and definitely needs to be seen at the theater on the big screen. And I would agree. Yeah. Actually.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's some great action sequences in there.
Dude, can we just say like the first scene after he becomes Morbius and it's on the ship? That scene is
I found that scene
dope.
Incredibly visceral. Yeah. And I was like,
it's so cool.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's kind of dark. And you're like, you're just noticing this transformation and you're just like, keeps you in mystery. And you're like, what happened to this guy? Mm-hmm. And it's like a pretty like gory scene. And you're like, dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
It felt very much like a horror movie to me. And that, I think it was interesting for me because at that point, they kind of, once they carry you into the film and they're like, oh, here are the characters, get to know these people. And then they take you into that specific corner of the world, of Morbius's world. I was like, dude, this is a horror film. And I liked that feeling of like, oh, this feels like.
I mean, yeah, he's a vampire,
He's a freaking vampire.
Lean into it.
Yeah. I loved that mood about it. And what are your just quick thoughts
overall
about the film?
How long was the movie? It was just around under 2 hours.
Less than 2 hours. Yeah, like an hour and 45.
I think I brought this up when we were talking about it after we got out of the movie. I think my favorite part about kind of setting up and usually with origin stories, there's certain tropes that certain hero movies go through, or even just character development ones. I think my favorite part of it was when in an origin story and this character and the main character, the protagonist, they get these powers and they're just so confused by it and they struggle with it. Yeah. And they're clumsy, they fumble with it, and they're like, I don't know what to do with this. I didn't ask to be this. Da, da, da. I love that Dr. Michael leaned into it right away and embraced it instead of being at first he was kind of like, whoa, what is this? But then when he got back into the lab to kind of discover what's going on with himself, he leaned into it. So when you see him I think a good portrayal of that was when he was testing out his sonar hearing. Yeah. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I quite enjoyed that one too.
He leaned into it. He got in with the bats. He was like, oh, okay. I feel this. Yeah. This is it. This is who I am now.
It's a very scientific way of approaching it too. Yeah. It's not just it's not something that they just did for the film.
That is a great way because he's a scientist. So he was like, let me explore what I can do because
he's an astute man.
This is different. Yeah.
Right. And to compare it to say like Andy Garfield in Amazing Spider-Man #1, when Peter gets his powers and he's doing the same thing, he's fumbling, he's on the keyboard, the keys come off, and he's like, oh God.
Same thing with Toby too. In
Yeah,
the first
and they all do
Spider-Man.
it. Yeah, they kind of have this moment of like clumsiness, and it's kind of like a baby deer fresh out of the womb, like I'm falling over,
trying
but
to stand
also,
on their leg. Yeah.
but they're also figuring it out as they go. And the thing that these characters, in particular have in common is that they're all scientific minds. And so I liked how they kind of brought that, like, I don't want to say homage, but in an origin story kind of vibe. Morbius was like, okay, I'm accepting what I have become. And this is, I'm gonna really understand what I am. Yeah,
because he knows he's smart enough to understand what's going on. Like, oh,
Right.
I know bats
Right.
have sonar hearing. So,
Yeah.
oh, I've noticed. I do that. What can I feel or do with this now that
Right.
I have it? And he's like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, there's a lot of benefits to this.
Right.
But then, as a scientist too, you realize, oh, there's a negative side of this. I need blood.
Exactly.
And, in the movie,
Yeah.
they talk about because he created artificial blood.
Right.
And he was like, oh, yes, this keeps me. And he's timing it out. How
Yeah.
long can he last
Yeah.
with it? And then he comes to realize, he's like, oh my God, I need human blood
Yeah.
to last like longer and for me to stay like
Right.
quote unquote healthy. And like you said earlier, like how he feels, he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to hurt
People.
he doesn't want to hurt any human being. So
And that's, I feel that's significantly different from like the comic book version, for instance, because, whereas Morbius in the books, he's kind of like, I need human blood. I just need human blood. Like they didn't quite take the modern approach and thought of like, because we live in a plant-based society now,
Yeah.
for instance, and how that's kind of the resolve of supplying people that need a certain thing. And so I feel like they carried that over for this film, and they're like, we need synthetic blood because we can't readily get it for people who need it as quickly as maybe. No, I don't think it's ever been really quick.
yeah.
But it's an interesting resolve for something like that. And the character too, because that's his way of keeping himself like normalized and stable. Whereas in the comics, he just kind of went, well, I'm just going to drink a bad guy's blood instead. Instead of not doing it or creating a synthetic resolution for it, he's like, oh, well, how about I still do it? But I'm just going to do it for people who are bad.
Yeah.
Which is totally understandable.
That
And
makes
it's a
sense
different
too.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different time, a different place. There were some other, differences between the books, the comic book character and the film, in that in the books he is a Nobel Prize winner, and then I believe in the film he like, did he not like decline to receive the award? So that immediately kind of changed that particular route for the character, because in the books he earns money from that. He which allows him to buy or rent the boat.
Yeah.
That is then seen in the film, and he takes his operations into the sea, into the open Eastern Sea or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a difference there, but it's intriguing the way that they treated it, because it kind of shows the persistence of Morbius, the cinematic version, in that he was just very determined to find a cure for this disease that was just ravaging his body. But, we'll get a little bit more into that further down the line. But, I kind of reshuffled our layout here, and I kind of wanted to dive into powers before we got into the other stuff. So this character's, he's particularly like powerful. In this first issue that I have here, and I'm going to show you, Jeff, Amazing Spider-Man 101. And once again, it's got the amazing treatment that is very much of the 70s. And this is why I'm a Silver Age girl.
Damn, is he knocking Peter out of his spider suit?
No.
It looks like it's like...
How many arms does Spider-Man?
Oh, shoot. Oh, wow. It's different arm. Oh, wow. Whoa.
I love this moment. So
That's insane.
Morbius in the books came in during a very peculiar time in Peter Parker's life. So this, in short, was a time when Peter, he was in the thicket of it with Gwen. He was really thinking about, okay, well, I need to calm down and not be the superhero that I can't be full time. And so he thought, hey, I'm a smart kid. I can make a serum that will take my powers away. So he wanted to reverse what happened to him. But in true Parker Luck way, instead of reversing the power, it actually gave him extra arms. So Peter started flopping around with 4 extra arms like an actual spider. And so Morbius comes into the fold, and on the cover, he's like smacking Spidey. Do you want to read the bubble? Give me your best Dracula.
Oh my God.
You can do your best Jared Leto. I don't know. Like,
I don't even know if I can do my best.
I don't know if Jared's voice would even fit that.
I don't even know. Fool. It will take more than a freak with 6 arms to stop a vampire. I feel like Dracula would be like British or something.
Yeah, right. Like it's like you feel like tonally you have to have an accent. But he's like essentially smacking Spidey off of a building, and again he has 6 arms, so it's classic,
so freaky,
so
looking.
classic. But in this issue, Spidey even says, like, you know, they're squaring off, and Spidey says like, oh, he's powerful. So the fact that Peter Parker with 6 arms as Spider-Man, who, remember, in the MCU can take the Winter Soldier one-handedly, is saying Morbius is like, oh, whoa, he's powerful.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, whoa, you put into the perspective of the power in that. It's kind of wild. But canon, his powers are superhuman strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, acute senses, as well as regenerative healing factor, fangs and claws, psionic gliding, mesmerism, vampire creation, and then immunity to most vampire vulnerabilities. So like garlic doesn't help, like sunlight doesn't hurt him.
Whatever. Yeah. Stereotypes.
None of that stuff works on him.
Thank God.
And then he has like virtual immortality, but he's not invulnerable, if that makes sense.
God, yeah.
So he can live forever. It's kind of like Death Becomes Her. He can live forever, but it doesn't mean his body's necessarily like invulnerable.
Yeah.
And then like of the comic book powers, it seems like in the film they kind of tapped into every single characteristic except for the mesmerism. I don't remember him like hypnotizing anybody.
No, I don't think
they didn't. Right?
Nah, it probably would have been too much.
I think so too. But hell knows they could have done it, because like Jared's well known for his like eyes, and so I could certainly see him like pulling off that power pretty well. But there is this, I wanted to touch on a little part of the film, you know, speaking of like the origin vibe of it. Like there's a moment where after Morbius has a confrontation with his new adversary, who we'll talk about later, he's in the subway, and then he realizes, you know, like the air currents, he's discovering more about his power.
I enjoyed that. I mean, I was just like I plays into like what I said earlier, like he leaned into what he was able to do, like his powers and everything. He was just like, what is, like, I'm fumbling, or I'm like hitting wall, but like, you know, he was like, no, like I noticed I can feel this, I can use this, and then boom, you know,
and then so in that moment, in this moment, actually, you know, the train is coming down the tunnel, and Morbius was realizing like, oh, I can actually utilize the airflow, and he was thinking about, you know, the way that his movement was, because his movement was being affected by these powers, and things just seemed to change for him, at least physically. And so he was able to learn how to glide and use the air, the tunnel to his advantage. And so in the books, Morbius actually, his bones turn partially hollow, like bats and like birds. And so in his bat-like form, it allows him to glide, and it's not so much flying, you know. It's not like he can fly. It's kind of like Jessica Jones. She did fly at one point, but like in the show and in the books, she doesn't fly. She just can jump very far because she's superhuman. And so that there's a similar instance with Morbius in that because his bones are partially hollowed, and it's because it's like a bat bird type of thing, an attribute, he can use that ability to really glide himself through through the city and through tunnels and whatnot. And then of course he's got this pseudo vampirism. So the big note about even the term pseudo vampirism is that it's science versus magic. So like I said before, it's not like Dracula came and bit him on the neck and it was like, you are now a vampire.
That's so like a played out trope too, man. Like it's been done a lot. It's been done since like almost pretty much the 20s, right? 30s or whatever.
Yeah, silent film.
Yeah.
Lost for all too. Yeah, so it's kind of like, how many times have we seen it? And I think that's what really does kind of make this character stand out in that way, is that he wasn't born of a traditional vampire background. And so that's why I kind of appreciate the pseudo vampirism, terminology.
Sure, yeah.
And like Morbius's mutation, it's scientific nature. So, despite his likenesses to vampires and bats, he's technically not a true vampire. So, Dracula is. We all know Dracula.
Yeah, I know him.
And he's also Marvel canon as well. And so special enzymes can transmit during the bites, which allow Morbius to create other pseudo vampires or progenies, which is a term that I don't know how much vampire lore you've read or watched. No, none.
Let me think back.
like Underworld, like you know what I mean, Van Helsing, True Blood.
Quick side story about Van Helsing. That walkthrough maze at Universal Studios,
yes.
I am scarred for freaking life.
Really? It was pretty scary.
So I hate. First of all, I hate those walkthrough stuff. I hate those.
So you
Halloween
don't do
mazes.
Halloween.
I've never been to horror nights. I've never been to Scary Fun.
Really?
Ever. I hate being scared. I don't mind it, but being scared on that capacity or level of like just my anxiety and just being like, and be like, like,
oh my God.
Dude.
You realize that just makes me want to take you.
So yeah, I want to say hate it, but it's just like, oh God, like if I don't got to do it, I won't do it. Side story, Van Helsing.
Yeah.
I knew what it was. I knew that it was like. A walk-through maze where people kind of walk out and scare you. And I was like, I'll wait outside. I'm young, by the way. My cousin from the Philippines are here. And he was like, come with us. And I was like, no. I don't want to. He's like, no, come here. So they go in a little bit. Mm-hmm. My cousin, and I was like, I'll just wait outside. My cousin comes back. He was like, hey, no, come inside. It's not a walk. It's like a show. Like they sit there, I was like, no, it's
lying.
He was like, no, trust me, it's fine. Like, come on, just come. And I'm like, whatever, fine, I'll go. I go in. It's definitely not a freaking show.
No, it's not.
It's full on people. Every
and
freaking every corner is just being like, and I'm like, bro, dog. And it's Van Helsing, so just there's a big ass werewolf in one section, and I'm just like, no, man.
I'm kind of sad they took it out.
It's replaced with something.
It's gone. It's a store now. It's a Starbucks now. It's gone.
Really?
It's gone.
Wow.
I'm kind of sad because I had fond memories of because it scared the tukas off of me. Like I thought it was pretty awesome, but it was scary. It was kind of scary.
Yeah. So Van Helsing. I mean, you have the Blade.
And you have Blade. Yeah.
I remember seeing those.
You have not?
I've seen probably the first one.
Okay.
But I never because it came out early 2000s, late 90s, right?
1998. Yeah,
late 90s,
1988.
Right? So
yeah.
So I never really fully watched it unless it was on TV movies, on TNT or whatever.
Yeah.
Underworld, never got into it. I may have seen the first one, but then that's also probably where I fell in love with Kate Beckinsale.
Who didn't?
Exactly. So yeah, but Underworld, I don't think I ever finished because it was a trilogy, right?
I think it was a trilogy, if not a whatever you call it.
Okay, but I never finished it all probably, but I definitely probably watched the first one.
Yeah, because I think they had, I don't know which number it was, but I think they had a spin-off where she wasn't in it, and then I was not interested.
Yeah.
But they had quite a bit of underworld goodness for a bit. But yeah, I feel like progenies is a term that they've tossed around in a lot of these films because it's very much of instead of calling it vampire baby or something, they've created a sire if you will. Progeny.
Yeah.
Progeny is the word. And we'll just discuss a couple of Morbiuses in a bit, but it is worth noting, however, pseudo-vamps act purely on bloodlust. And Morbiuses, they didn't inherit any of his powers. And so it's interesting that he can create them, but they don't take on the attributes. So he's not really like their father. It's not their daddy.
I just imagine like it's like, like how Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, and he's like with the ants and everything. Yes. He's like, oh, you're not so.
Yeah, yeah.
And just Jared Leto's just like fathered, so just like a million bats.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank God he didn't have to
I know,
take responsibility. He's like, shoot, like now I'm responsible for these bats.
Bantony. He starts naming them like Paul Rudd. This is Anthony, meet Bantony. So they don't inherit that stuff. Which I feel is very different than most vampire stories. Like they just don't get anything, and they can die. They dust like the progenies he makes. They don't get that immortality aspect.
Yeah, and
if they get spiked, they're gone. They turn into poof. It's like Thanos snapped all over again.
Oof.
So it's interesting stuff. So this is the part where we're gonna jump into the more familiar things that we'll be able to compare between comic book and film, with the affiliations and such. And so I didn't want to get too much into the groups that he's in, because I feel like we're tossing around all these familiar names, but we haven't yet gotten a real green light to go for it.
Yeah.
But some of the assemblages, affiliations that Morbius has been linked to include, you're gonna hear this name time and again until it finally happens, but the Midnight Suns. Which has an incredible roster of characters that Jeff is slowly gaining familiarity with, which includes Moon Knight and Doctor Strange and Black Cat and Ghost Rider and such. He's also part of the Legion of Monsters, which is a given because Werewolf by Night and all of them, as well as Horizon Labs and the Nine. And so among those affiliations, the one that stands out the most, at least when it comes to the SSU, is Horizon Labs. And I don't know if you noticed this in the movie, but it's on the side, like, you know how they always show those overview shots of the city?
Yeah.
And there's always some landmark that's like, oh, I should be paying attention to this.
Yeah, sure.
So much like Avengers Tower, in Morbius, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. There is a building that says Horizon Labs.
I feel like I did at least. Yeah. I think I did see something like that.
And so this is essentially the laboratory that he does most of his work in.
Yes.
So where he has the bat pit tunnel thing.
The bat cylinder.
Yeah, the cylinder of bats. and all of that, that all takes place in Horizon. And so in the books, Horizon Labs is a leading company that creates most of the advanced technology that you read in the Marvel Universe. And so this is very prominent in the Spider-Man universe, and it's headed by scientific pioneer Max Modell, who is not only a friend of Peter Parker's, but somebody he deeply looks up to. Like, this is one of the people that really, helps him in his more scientific Peter Parker mode. And Spider-Man, of course. And then, related to that, a number of people have been affiliated with Horizon Labs, including Liz Allen, who became an investor in the comic books. And so Liz Allen, imagine if you will, Laura Harrier, becomes an investor in Horizon Labs. I love doing this because it's like, oh, this is interesting. Putting the faces.
Yeah. You're like, that's how I like to see things too.
And then, of course, Peter Parker, both Peter Parker and Dr. Octavius, when he took over Parker's body. So they both had to do with Horizon. And then, of course, Bruce Banner, because Bruce Banner. And so as far as teams go, currently, Morbius is listed as an active member of ARMOR, which stands for Alternate Reality Monitoring and Operational Response Agency.
Nice.
That would actually be Armora, but whatever. That's
Sure.
a small detail.
Armor Agency or Armora?
Amora, which is almost like Sylvie.
Gamora?
Gamora. Where's Gamora? And funny enough, Howard the Duck is on that same team.
Jesus.
So, Howard the Duck and Morbius. I
What a
see
squad.
it. Seth Green.
What a squad.
Such a squad. And so now we'll kind of roll into the actual people that are in Morbius's periphery. And so beginning on the SSU side, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
No parents. Like he's already in the hospital as a young child.
Straight up, yeah.
No parents, right?
Yeah.
No parents. Why did they do this? Is it a Disney? Oh, it's not Disney. I was gonna say is this a Disney thing?
I
This
mean,
not.
maybe it's just like if it's not needed to explain the character.
Yeah, they just don't. They just don't do it.
I mean, because also some people's audiences hate too much exposition.
This
so
is
maybe
very true.
so maybe they were like, dude, screw it. Like if it doesn't affect him who he is as a character down the line, like if he didn't learn like a lesson from them,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like it's like, you know, Batman's parents type of thing.
So question for you then,
Yeah.
based on that.
Oh God, I'm gonna eat my words, huh?
No. Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
Oh, was it 2? One,
Okay.
2. When Peter finds the subway coins and he does that whole thing where he's looking for his dad and his dad's like, what his dad left behind. How do you feel about that?
Oh my God.
Oh, but did you even see that?
It's just it's been a while, but it's also just like I don't know. Like you feel like they had. I mean, but also Peter Parker's dad has never played like a huge role.
No, yeah,
in
no.
any movies.
Yeah. And not even the comics. It was always Uncle Ben, of course.
Yeah.
Like they did a couple of little what ifs and they do mention, you know, Richard, but it was never.
I mean, who knows?
like
Maybe
Ben.
maybe they just ASM just wanted to try something maybe different.
Yeah.
You know, because you know, but I don't know.
It's an
Like,
interesting take, right?
It is.
Yeah.
You know, it's not wrong to question, you know, artistic choices.
Yeah.
It's never wrong because, you know, the creators of the movie or the film or whatever, they wanted to say a certain something and maybe they felt like it, you know, to them it hit a little bit more emotionally than that they want, and they're like, oh, let's keep that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a choice, but you know.
Yeah.
But then again, you can't please everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you,
As always.
yeah, you can't please everybody. Like unless it's like, oh, that movie had too much exposition.
Right.
You know, maybe that could be like people's like gripe with Tarantino movies because his dialogue is so dense.
Yeah.
But you don't realize it's useful until like it comes into play.
Yeah.
You know, or there's a movie where it's not enough exposition, and you're like, well, I want to know more about that, and then and you're just like, well, but there's a lot of things that probably go into it why they couldn't show or say what they wanted to say.
Right. Yeah.
You to each their own.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I feel like I asked this because, you know, whereas in the film it doesn't really feel like you need to know that he comes from a family or he has parents. Exactly. It very much does affect him I guess so. In the books, they kind of draw more of a portrait of his parents in the books. First of which we'll talk about is Macarioa Morbius. And this is like the funny thing because like you have to remember their last name is Morbius. Yeah. Because it sounds like such a superhero name.
It does, actually. And you forget like, oh, that's actually his literal last name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Macarioa Morbius. Not much is known about Macarioa. In Amazing Spider-Man number 699.1. Okay, real quick. This was a very painful moment for me as a collector.
Oh no.
Because Marvel had this era of doing 0.1, 0.2, 0.3.
That's so freaking weird.
And I was like, oh my God.
There's going to be like 9 versions of the same.
But they weren't the same. They were all one issue, but they were like segmented as point, like whatever. And so they would have like 699.5. And so they would all still be technically an issue.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And then you put in variants, so it would be like 699.1A, 699.
No.
It was terrible.
Oh my God.
Such a headache.
That's frustrating.
And of course that's leading up to Amazing Spider-Man number 700, which then had 30 more variants and points.
Bro.
Only to
if y'all thought this whole variant thing in the live action world was crazy, what the hell?
So bad.
Y'all cannot complain about live action variants anymore because the comics are.
Oh yeah, no, they got it trumped. It's not. I hate it. It's not okay. And so anyway, in issue 699.1, this is kind of where they actually spoke about his family and at least his parents.
Got it.
Because like like in 101, for instance, he's already Morbius. He jumps in. He's already the vampire.
Yeah.
And they kind of go back a little bit, but you don't get the full story until 699, which is wild to think about because 699, I want to say, was like in 2000 something.
Okay.
2012 or whatever it was, right? Yeah. And so you have to think about it. Character, once again, came from 1971. So much of that origin story wasn't told until much later and then not full blown until a more modern book. But the father is interesting because like Morbius says it himself in the book. He says, famed surrealist, author, painter, and filmmaker, known for making the unknown known, not known for raising me. I don't ever recall seeing him in person. He merely existed as a memory I never had.
Dang.
Right. That's so like, oh, my heart. He's actually quite sad. I mean, this is Morbius, but so he's absent father, absolutely absent father. And so the idea is that Macarioa was more of like so immersed in his own work that he just didn't care that he had a wife and a child anymore.
Sounds like a lot of heroes, origin stories.
It's kind of sad. Yeah. And so this actually has quite an impact on his mother, who was simply known as Mrs. Morbius, which is kind of funny. I just imagine like
screw it. Yeah, just put Mrs.
Yeah, exactly. So Mrs. Morbius, unnamed, single mother, who raised young Morbius after Macarioa abandoned them. She was the daughter of a bookstore owner who passed on a love for books to both the mother and Michael. And it's kind of sad because the grandfather, she's described as the grandfather's unwanted daughter. So not only did she not sustain her husband, but there were no subsequent romances for her. She was just very much, it's her and her son. And that's all she cared about was her and her son and books. And so, have you seen Chocolat or Chocolate? The movie Chocolate?
Wow, I feel like I've heard that name before and someone has told me to watch it.
Johnny Depp and Juliette Binoche.
Oh, it's a Johnny Depp movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, but
it's older. It's in the 90s or something. Maybe early 2000s. I actually quite love that. If only for the visceral like chocolate making.
Sure.
There's a lot of that. But there's Carrie-Anne Moss is also in that film. And she plays a mother whose son, she's a widow. She plays a mother whose son is I don't want to say has a blood disease necessarily, but he's like deemed unwell, as she would say. Like she's very helicoptery over him because she doesn't want him to get hurt and doesn't want him to get sick and pass away like the father did. And so I like immediately when I was going back and reading these issues, the mother struck me as very much like that character who helicopter parented Michael as a child and just, it was even more enhanced because the father left and because he also had this blood disease. So she basically dotes on her son until and also well, not maybe dotes is not even the right word, but she's actually quite stern with him. Like he wants to go out and play and she's like, you can't go. You're not allowed to go.
Dang.
And so he stays inside and he reads instead. And that's what he did. And that's kind of how he became
a genius.
Yeah. So it's very interesting in that. And so, yeah, I thought it was, looking back on it, I was like, oh, it would have been interesting to see his upbringing and how he arrived at that hospital. But it's forgivable at the same time.
Yeah.
But a character that we do come to know in the film is Dr. Emil Nicholas, who is portrayed by Jared Harris, who's one of my favorite characters from Mad Men. I don't know if you watched Mad Men
No,
too
I
much, but he was
But, okay.
yeah, he's
yeah.
fantastic.
I can see
on
how
that
you
show.
can play that kind of
Oh
character.
yeah,
in that,
absolutely.
yeah.
He's very much a period piece kind of guy, at least when it comes to old 1900s ish. He is credited mostly as Morbius's mentor. So like apparently when I was digging around, because I knew that he was named Dr. Nicholas, but I was like, okay, wait, does he have a counterpart necessarily? And then I started fishing around, and like a lot of his credit as in the film was just Morbius's mentor. Like he didn't have a name necessarily, which was interesting.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I think that was early on before they kind of defined that he was going to be Dr. Emil Nicholas. And so again, in the SSU, he's a hematologist, study of blood and problems affecting red blood cells, white blood cells, and all that good stuff, bone marrow, proteins, preventing clotting and all that lovely science talk.
Oh yeah.
So, hematologists are physicians who study and treat common blood disorders and blood cancers. So, Jared Harris in the film, he plays a very neutral character, you would say. He's a good guy. He's obviously a good guy. And he essentially is a doctor who wants nothing more than to help these sick children.
Yeah.
Basically stabilize their lives, and he follows both Morbius and who becomes his sort of adopted brother throughout the film. And I thought he was a great portrayal. But yeah, he didn't readily have a comic book counterpart until I dug more and more and more. And then I think I found him because they changed the names on us. So it is actually quite, if you look at it, it's like, duh, but it took me a minute because I was like, who's the character? And so in the comic books, there is a character named Emil Nikos.
There it is.
So I guess they took some more westernizations with the names, I guess, so he went from Emil Nicholas to he went from Emil Nikos to Nicholas.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's another name change that we'll get to in a minute, but there's no distinct clarification that Nicholas ties to Nikos, but I think it's the closest candidate, personally speaking. And so in this instance, in the film, he was the doctor. And so Michael was a young child, he was the doctor. In the books, Emil Nikos was actually a childhood friend of Morbius's. And so he's the kid that Morbius would say to his mom, I want to go play with Emil. And the mom would say, no, you can't. And so very similarly, however, Emil grows up to become the hematologist that helps Michael with his blood disease. And so he helps try to, it's interesting how they kind of change that idea, right?
Yeah.
And so Emil tries to find the cure with Morbius. And so he's working side by side with him all the way up until he's inevitably killed after Morbius changes. So
okay.
For those of you who have not seen the film, when Morbius takes to conducting all of his experiments on a boat, what would you call it? Large vessel.
Yeah.
It's not just a boat. It's
international,
like
international waters. Over international waters. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. He imagined instead, he has Dr. Martin Bancroft with him, but in the books, Emil comes along, and so it's Emil, Martin, and Michael. And so he's doing all these experiments, and he finally decides, okay, I'm going to do this last one because I am on my last leg.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he changes into the vampire. And the moment that Emil opens, he gets into that cell. It's very familiar, like the movie. He goes into this cell, a holding cell of some sorts.
Yeah.
And the minute in the comic books, Emil opens it, he's taken. It's very interesting because I feel like every time somebody encounters Morbius for the first time in the comic books, they all make a point of to say what he looks like. They all do it. They're like, you're so white. It's like, and I just like, you know that they mean pale, but like the way that they wrote it was just kind of, I don't know. And it's always the first thing. Spider-Man says it. Emil says it. They all say it. You're so white and pale and you look like a vampire. Like it's so... I don't know.
As well, it gets him triggered and he's like...
Yeah. And the thing is that they never get past that. They're all attacked before they can finish their thought. Oh. But it's always the same. And I was like, dude, there are like years between these books and they still say the same thing. It's really funny. I don't know. But anyway, so he opens the door, he gets attacked. And like in the books, it's funny because you would think, oh, maybe he bit him. Maybe he drains his blood or whatever. But in the comic, he literally just grabs him by the throat and he just like chokes him to death. And I was like, that's interesting. But then much like when he drains somebody of their blood and he realizes like, oh, he normalizes and goes, oh shoot, I just did something I wasn't supposed to. He almost has a similar reaction with Emil, and he goes, oh, Emil? Like, oh, Emil, oh my God. Like he realized he killed him. But it was interesting because it's like he didn't suck his blood. So he just had a moment of clarity because it was Emil. So it really kind of
interesting.
It got to him. Yeah, it was the humanity of him just really.
I think I can understand why they switched.
Yeah.
That kind of because like you said, Emil grew up with him, right?
Right.
And then he just dies.
He gets killed. Yeah, by Morbius himself.
Yeah.
So in the film, it's much different. I feel like
in the film, there's always like when it comes to like the protagonist needs like motivation, and I feel like
it's like the Phil Coulson effect.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I feel like Morbius had, I want to say three main motivations. Was having Emil as his mentor was the first, because Emil took care of him since he was a child. Yeah. Second one was Dr. Martine, because that is the token love interest.
Of course, yeah.
So that's why they put Emil as a mentor. Yeah. So that way Dr. Martine can be on the boat with him to run these experiments. And then because she's knocked out cold, he has this extra motivation to be more violent and gruesome. And then obviously the third motivation being I want to cure myself. Yeah. But also like, okay, I can't cure myself. Let me just lean into this. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's why I would see them switching, is just to give Michael Morbius his love interest and then his mentor figure. Yeah. So it's kind of like, Spider-Man in a way. He has his Ben Parker, and then he has his MJ or Gwen or
yeah, good boy.
Or or his oh God.
Are you thinking Felicia?
I was like, Black Cat. No. Okay, come on.
Yeah. No, you're good.
I was like, Hardy? Okay, Hardy.
Oh, Hardy would have worked. Yeah. So. No, you're right. I agree. It's an interesting take, and it's an interesting way to also ensure that the character doesn't readily come across as like villainous. Like he's doing villainous things in the film where he's killing people in an incredibly cool and brutal way. Yeah. It's so cool. I can't get over it. I think that's my favorite scene in the film. But they're also ensuring that, okay, not only does Emil get to live another day, and he does get to fulfill a bigger role throughout the film. Yeah. And he also kind of dies in a way that, like you said, it gives him reason to kind of persist and
stop.
And stop his future adversary. And before we get into that, I wanted to kind of touch on the progenies. In the comics, at least, he's only got a couple. But some famous ones, for comparative reasons, Lestat and Louis from Interview with the Vampire. There's Bill Compton and Jessica Hamby from True Blood. I was big into True Blood, by the way.
Nice.
I loved True Blood.
It's a Showtime show, right?
HBO.
HBO.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It was scandalous.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Anna Paquin.
Oh.
That's how she met her husband.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Wild, huh? And then, of course, Dracula and Mina Harker and Winona Ryder.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. And so for Morbius, he had two progenies that are at least worth noting. The first one of which is Victor Vic Slaughter. What kind of name is that? Vic Slaughter. Vic Slaughter.
That is a name.
Yeah.
I will say that.
This guy is so interesting, and I kind of want to see him somewhere in the MCU or whatever, even in the SSU or whatever. But he was a former U.S. Marine sent to murder Morbius by a CIA agent.
Nice.
Simon Stroud. And not even for governmental or like professional reasons, but because Simon wanted Morbius dead. It was completely personal. And so the team that Slaughter brought with him, they were looking to ambush Morbius while he was visiting the grave of his then deceased wife or fiance, Martine Bancroft. So she died in the comics, and he was visiting her grave, as all of our heroes and anti-heroes kind of do.
Of course.
They have their moment.
Oh, yeah.
And it went sideways because he's a freaking pseudo-vampire.
Yeah.
And so he bit Vic on the neck, and he left him to die. It's so cool because he bites his neck, and then he tosses him into a grave that just happens to be open. And he's like, die. But he rises from the dead, and then he becomes a pseudo-vampire. And then he becomes an adversary, as they always do. You know, it's like, oh, you made me what I am. I hate what I am.
I am here because of you.
Exactly.
You did this to me.
You did this to me.
All I wanted was to impress you.
Oh gosh. And so that's Vic Slaughter. Whether or not we'll see Vic, I have no idea, but he's not in the first film. He's not in Morbius. But there is somebody who is, and that brings us to Lucius Crown, who is Milo Morbius in the SSU. Who'll help us, and he's going to help us segue into main adversaries in just a second. But first, pop quiz?
Crap.
No, I think you can do this one.
Right.
I took it easy on this one. I felt like we're not going to do too much, but kind of easy.
My brain cells are shot now.
Let's just see. Oh yeah, that's what's really getting you.
My brain cells are recovering.
Your Marvel brain cells are very sleepy.
Oh,
that's all.
man.
Okay, so let's see how observant you are. Can you name at least 3 Easter eggs that are SSU or MCU
Gosh.
in Morbius?
Oh God.
This can be a prop. This can be verbal. Whatever you want. Any.
Are you
3.
counting the trailers or the actual movie?
I'll accept it.
Because we both know.
I know,
They cut
that's-
a lot of stuff
Oh,
out from the
dude,
trailers.
I would just
I
like.
can name 2 from the trailers already.
I just want to ask so many questions.
I can name 2 from the trailers.
Right. Okay.
Immediately.
Name 2 from the trailers.
Actually, I can name 3.
Do
but
it.
obviously.
Let's do it. Let's go.
Well, the first one is obviously. Well, they have the Daily Bugle.
Daily Bugle. There you go.
You have the Toby Spider-Man graffiti murderer across.
Murderer.
And then you have Vulture.
Yeah.
I have that.
Adrian Toombs.
You have that one.
Yeah.
And then you have but they cut it from the trailer where Morbius says, I'm Venom. I'm just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
I'm kind of sad that they cut that because I think
Yeah.
Jared delivered it
Yeah.
so exceptionally well.
And the context doesn't make sense in the movie. Sorry.
Yeah.
The movie was, I genuinely did like the film.
Yeah.
But I was excited to hear that line though.
Same.
I was excited to hear it.
And then they didn't do it.
And then you said, I'm Venom. And I was like,
He's like, I am Venom. And then what
okay.
did he do?
And then he left. He did
the hand thing.
Yeah,
he
he just
broke his
walked away.
hand. Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
you need the payoff.
Yeah, I know the payoff was so good, and I'm kind of bummed out. Who sat there and was like, it's too funny.
Who's sitting in the
It
editing
was so
room, bro?
good. I loved how he did it. He even did the handshake with the elbow tap.
And it'd be like, it's Dr. Michael Morbius.
Morbius at
oh
your
my God, it
service.
was great.
It was so good.
Come on.
Yeah, but yeah, still well done. Yeah, so
What other significant ones are there though?
they're only on top of that, they're only 3, at least from my perspective, one of which is, well, no, not even that, 2 more. 3, actually. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. 3. I remember one that I didn't write down here. But of course, there's Black Cat. They mention it on the Daily Bugle.
On the Daily Bugle panel, yeah.
It says like Black Cat, hero or
thief or whatever.
Yeah. And then it also, that I think that same paper actually even mentioned Chameleon, which is obviously an older rogues gallery adversary of Spidey's who can shapeshift and change his appearance. And then Rhino. Rhino is also mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are some interesting ones. But yeah, well done, Jeff. You did it.
I try.
And so when it comes to main adversaries, there are truly, at least, in respect to the film and balancing that with the comic books, there are 2. There are just 2. And so, like we just mentioned, there's Milo Morbius, who's officially been introduced, portrayed by Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor of Doctor Who.
Nice.
And so his comic book counterpart, his name is Lucius Crown, and he's also known as Hunger. So before we get into Matt Smith's character from the film, I wanted to kind of just cover Lucius a bit because there are some significant differences between the two. But so Lucius Crown in the books, he was originally a Hydra agent. And we're talking Hydra. So he's one of those guys. Yeah, it's an interesting, again, we've done this in many episodes, but like imagining if they actually went with these kinds of origins and these kinds of templates, like parallel to what they've crafted in the MCU.
Yeah.
So if you're like thinking, oh gosh, imagine Matt Smith as a Hydra agent and then like working in the same periphery as the Hydra that we know from Captain America and all of those films. It's kind of nutty to imagine. But so Lucius in the comic books, he was requested to abduct Morbius for the Magia. And so the Magia are basically...
Oh, Magia, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly what you think it is. And so it's the Italian mafia. And for this man named Don Vincente Fortunato.
Nice.
Fortunato. I tried to think of it in an Italian accent.
I don't even know how that...
And so Don Vincente Fortunato is he's a Hydra affiliate and of course part of the Magia. And so he hires Lucius to abduct Morbius, and they want to perform these experiments on him because they know he's got this prowess and he's got these superhuman powers, and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And so he's enlisted to fetch him, if you will, along with a doctor named Andrea Jansen. And so of course, as all things, things get a little more complicated. Spider-Man comes in, this character named Shock. It's an acronym, SHOC.
Oh, geez.
AKA Todd Fields. They both jump into this sort of, they all cross paths in the midst of this abduction. And so Todd Fields, this suit, it's an interesting suit. It channels Dark Force. And we've talked about the Dark Force, I think, in the Peggy Carter episode.
Yes.
Because the Dark Force was seen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well as Agent Carter.
I remember this. I remember that.
Right, with Whitney Frost. And so it's more of a Nightcrawler thing in the comics. It's kind of where he bamfs to. And it originates from Dark Force dimension and all this crazy stuff. I don't know. I'm waiting for them to mention it in Doctor Strange. I don't know if they will. But so Shock wears this suit that channels the Dark Force. And so in the scuffle, they're all battling each other or whatever. And then Morbius, once again, like kind of prevails, and he then attacks and then drains Lucius, and then he creates the progeny. And so that's kind of their relationship in the comics. It's very different than what we see in the films, which again, is he's Lucian Crown.
Yes.
But it's also like Lucius Crown. But they call him Milo Morbius for some reason. He really forced the Milo on him.
Oh yeah,
which I thought was cute because I love Milo Ventimiglia.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's my homie. I when I was looking up articles and just trying to dig deeper into the meaning of this name, it very much is as simple as Morbius was kind of a little he just wanted to name this kid the same name that every kid before him was named when he got to the hospital. Yeah.
It's pretty dark too, because he's like, the last kid that was there was Milo and he died. And
Exactly.
I'm just gonna call every single person Milo since they're eventually gonna die. And you're like, Jesus.
Yeesh. Yeah, so there's his real name is Lucian, or Lucian. Depends
Lucian,
which accent you're using. Again, portrayed by Matt Smith, as well as Joseph Eason as a child. And so, he's an interesting take because he's almost an original character if you think about it. But fun fact for you, Matt Smith apparently was encouraged to take this role thanks to fellow Doctor Who alumni Karen Gillan, aka Nebula.
Wow.
Right. Interesting, huh?
Love that.
Yeah. And so, in the films, it's pretty simple. He has a similar, if not same, blood disease as Morbius and the other children in the hospital. He bonds with Morbius very early on, becomes kind of like an adoptive brother, and they get along very well, which seemed very unnatural almost for Michael because he almost didn't really get along with anybody else. Only the doctor and only Milo. That Milo.
Yeah.
Lucian then becomes a billionaire later in life, as we see. He's got a pretty swanky, I don't know, flat or house. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But he succumbs to the power that Morbius has kind of crafted for himself somewhere down the line, and becomes a vampire or a pseudo vampire, if you will. Non-traditionally.
Okay.
So he's not really a progeny in the film where he is in the comics, because in the comics he's bitten, but in the film he takes the serum.
He takes it himself.
He takes it himself.
Takes matter into his own hands.
Which I gotta say, when I first watched the film, I think I literally gasped out loud because for some reason, I didn't see that happening. Like, I didn't see him like leaving so there's the scene where Morbius has been captured. He's in jail and Milo comes to see him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as his quote unquote lawyer, which is kind of funny because it's like, it's such a daredevil trope. But he comes to see him and then he leaves him a sack of blood to kind of sustain himself.
Yeah.
Or at least get out.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh snap, he's not using a cane. And I like went, he took it.
I know. I don't know. I don't think I saw it, but I was definitely just like,
yeah.
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
Like
it just got real because they played it off very well, at least I think they did.
It did. It was like you really couldn't predict it like that way,
right.
You know? Like,
because like I believe that the scene before that they do have a confrontation at the Horizon Labs.
At the labs, yes.
Right, where Milo's like, why do you get to live and I have to die?
That's what that's why I loved, that's why the story works.
Yeah.
Because as a protagonist, like a lot of these stories sometimes, like when you create a story, like to really like get people in, like you need like conflict. Conflict is like the most important part in storytelling.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have Michael Morbius. He has this quote unquote cure, but it turns him to this horrible, being.
Yeah.
And then, and he's trying to create something for his best friend Milo.
Yeah.
To heal both of them.
Yeah.
But then Milo sees how he is, and he just doesn't want. He's like, I can't let you do this because it's doing something to me. Even though, like, yeah, I am quote unquote, I am cured. I'm not really cured. But he doesn't care. But Milo doesn't care. He's like, I don't care. I'm just trying to free myself of this pain. I don't care what it does to me, good or bad.
Yeah.
I'm tired of living through this. Why do you get to do it, but I can't? And it's just like, oh, well, dude, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And then boom, then, he's like, oh, and then
that
shows the difference in power mindset.
Yeah.
of each person.
Exactly.
Because Michael just wants to like help people. And he's like, no, this is dangerous, like da da da. And then Milo is just like, oh, all I got to do is like suck one human blood out, one human
it's
a
like
day
nothing to
maybe
him.
or whatever it is. And he's like, cool, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Like I've been living in this hellhole of a disease. All I got to do is kill somebody once a day. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's where this morality, compass comes into play.
That's exactly
and then that's where, the main conflict is. And you're like, okay, how are they going to solve this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very well said. And it really didn't occur to me until the second viewing when we saw it that they really do start to craft the personalities, the different personalities within the boys as young children, because I think they kind of take advantage of expectations in a way for the audience, like by presenting, oh, Morbius is a difficult child, and like, oh, he's naming the new kid an old name, and it's very morbid in its own way. And then that, oh, Lucian is more of the, oh, he's so sweet and he's very naive. But then the sentiment changes with the courtyard scene, where this is like, after Morbius has departed for a quote unquote gifted school for youngsters in upper New York. Yeah. I was like, X-Men? Because the minute they said it, I was like, are you legally allowed to say that? Because they really did use an exact line. Yeah. The gifted youngsters. I was like,
gifted. Yeah.
But anyway, so Morbius has gone off to this quote unquote school to kind of, become an academia sort of student. And it leaves Lucian by himself in the hospital, and he goes out. He loses the letter. The letter that Morbius wrote him flies out the window, and he goes to get, oh, my letter. It was so cute. Yeah. But after, he's confronted by these boys and bullied, you see the same energy emerge from him as a child that comes back after he's become the vampire. Yeah. And that, he doesn't care that he has to kill a person. What's one person? He doesn't really care at all. And it's that same mood that it's kind of like, oh, they kind of catch 22 you and like, or bait and switch you, in that you're thinking, oh gosh, like Morbius has become this quote unquote vampire and he's killing people to survive, but also he's the lesser demon between the two. Despite being almost a literal demon. Yeah. And so I thought that was really interesting how they played that out. But of course, in the film, spoiler alert, he succumbs to the anti-serum that Morbius creates, and he is no longer a vampire. I think I appreciate their film relationship more than I do the comic books. I just think it's pretty compelling. I mean, there's some parts of it that are, predictable, if you will, but I kind of enjoyed that, and I enjoyed what they did with it. And then, of course, there another notable adversary, Spider-Man, Peter Parker.
Oh yeah, who could forget?
Yeah, and so like I mentioned, he comes in during this 6-arm thing. Yeah, look at this. The very first page, it's like The Amazing Spider-Man. And the title of the issue is A Monster Called Morbius. And then here's Peter with his 6 arms.
Dude, that is weird looking.
Isn't that the weirdest thing ever? And so I remember like back in the day when they first made the first like Toy Biz or whatever action figures, they had a 6-arm Spider-Man. And I remember
looks weird.
I just remember being a tiny baby and being in KB and looking at it and being like, why does Spider-Man have 6 arms? Because he just had like 4 fleshy arms and
I don't
2
know why
in the
this looks
suit.
so weird.
Oh yeah, and he goes through that the entire this 6-arm thing lasts at least 3 issues, I believe. Oh, and this is my favorite part. We're gonna segue real quick because my girl is in this issue. So this is like by this point, Gwen and Peter are very serious. They're like, they're in college and all that good stuff. And it's funny because she's calling him up. She hasn't seen him in days, days, weeks, whatever it is, because he has freaking 6 arms. Sure. And he's like, I can't see her. But because he's Peter Parker, he thinks deflecting her and like avoiding her is the answer. Yeah. And so she's like trying to coerce him to come out, and she's like, we can go see an R-rated movie. It's like, what does she say? She says it right here. She's like, in honor of Betty Friedman's birthday, I've decided to play liberated woman and treat you to an R-rated flick of your choice. I should warn you, I've already seen Love Story, but I've got enough Kleenex left to sit through it again. And it's just kind of like, that's the spicy talk. But yeah, he kind of, he like turns her down and he rejects her, and she just like takes it very badly. And then he starts going through these scenarios of like, oh, I can't tell Aunt May, with her bad heart, she'll have a heart attack. And he goes through this entire issue, practically speaking to everybody that in his normal life. And it's just so crazy. So this, their first confrontation takes place across 2 issues, 101 and 102. And then of course, to make things better, like Dr. Connor is part of it.
Oh,
Dr. Connor's
great.
Just as it's funny because I think it's in this issue or 102, but just when Spidey's about to buckle and like Morbius is gonna bite him, Dr. Connors bursts through and he's like, "What are you doing to Spider-Man?" And then they start fighting, but Connors has this thing. I can't remember if it's like this in Amazing Spider-Man, but when he gets excitable, he turns into the Lizard. It's very much like a Bruce Banner thing.
Oh my gosh.
But instead of being angry, he gets excitable. So when he's like...
Excitable?
Like when he's like, the adrenaline is like kicking. And he's like, yeah.
I'm the
like,
Lizard.
That's exactly it. He turns into the Lizard. And then so now Spidey's like... Spidey's got... His girlfriend's about to leave him. He's got 6 arms. He's worried about Aunt May. He's getting crap from the Bugle. Then he's like, what happened? And he's like... There are 2 voices, and it's literally Morbius and the Lizard. And he's like, oh, man. Poor Peter Parker.
Jeez, man.
Yeah. So these 2 issues are pretty amazing. But, like I mentioned, they kind of show a little bit of Morbius's origin in this issue. And so as you can see here, there's the ship, and then like something happens to the captain of that ship. And there's some distinct similarities, but the real retelling is in that 699.1. And so, throughout those 2 issues, Morbius and Spidey like tangle head on, and then it's funny because like they get washed off of they're having a fight near the bridge. It's always the New York Bridge, and Spidey like manages to thwip and pulls them into the water, and they both start going. They're in the river.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because like Morbius is holding like a vial in his hand, and Spidey's like, "Oh, I only have enough webbing for one shot. I better make it count." And you see Morbius's hand just like, and he's like intending to save him, and he's like, "Oh no, I only caught the vial." So he only caught the vial, and then Morbius like quote unquote drowns.
Wow.
And he's gone for the rest of the arc. But happy ending. Dr. Connors, once he's not excitable anymore, becomes himself, and then he helps Spidey get rid of the 6 arms. So it only lasted for so long. But how much do you want to see Tom Holland or Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire with 6 arms?
It's just so because only I was like, what characters
so
have I seen like with that many arms?
It's so jarring.
And it's it was that character from Mortal Kombat,
Goro,
and
Shiva.
Yeah,
but they had 4 arms, no? Oh, Goro had 6.
Yeah, but it was like okay, like I was okay with it.
It was so freaking weird.
Yeah,
because their torsos were super long.
But then they're like seeing that, I was like, that looks so.
Because it's
weird.
Spider-Man.
Sure, probably.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, trailer aside. Speaking of Spider-Man, Morbius trailer aside, and that little nugget of Tobey Maguire's graffiti on the wall.
Yeah.
Which Spider-Man are you betting is this universe?
Oh,
which one do you think it is? I'm still gonna keep my original answer. I think it's Tobey Maguire's. I'm just gonna say that. Whatever. I know people want it to be Andy's, but I think it's Tobey's.
It's just I think I mean my question is why Tobey's?
And also why?
Like why Tobey's? Like man hasn't done a Spider-Man movie in since 2007.
Can you imagine being Tobey Maguire, who is not on the internet?
Yeah.
And then people are like, hey, are you in Morbius? And he's like, what? And this is before No Way Home.
Yeah. Like, what? Why would you choose his?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But,
and they could have made it generic as hell. They could have made it completely generic.
It's true.
Non-identifying at all. But they purposefully
it's very obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's Toby's. I'm not saying I would like it to be Andrew's, but in terms of which Spidey that I would see Morbius having like a more like a better interaction with, I guess. I don't know. I feel like him and Andrew would be the best, like head to head.
Ooh, I would like to see that
in my head. Just I feel like Andrew's in fight Spidey talk. Yeah.
Dude, again, I feel like I've said it in every episode since like No Way Home came out, but Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is like
his Spidey clips are pretty top tier.
He's so good. He's exactly how I imagine him sounding in the comic book.
Hey Max, I missed you, man.
Exactly. Like he's got the little like Brooklyn accent or Queens.
Yeah.
He's Queens.
Queens.
Yeah, and it's like it's just I love it. And I could see and as much as I am team I don't need ASM3, I wouldn't mind it being Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. But I just think it's Toby's for some reason. I don't know why. Or it could be.
Who knows, man? Yeah. Who knows what Sony Marvel has cooked up?
Do you think we'll see Spidey and Morbius in the Sinister Six?
You know what is crazy about like Spidey? Quick side tangent before we move on. Mm-hmm. Like Spidey can't get played out.
No, never. He has not yet.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like people want Spidey.
Oh yeah.
And whether it's Tom, whether it's Andrew, whether it's Toby, it doesn't matter. It
doesn't matter.
Freaking 3 Spideys.
Whether it's Miles.
Spidey. Or Miles, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I saw a hot take today on Miles, and I was just like, dude, why are you tweeting this? I don't know who said this. It was just someone said, Miles is not Spider-Man. I know. That was the first line of the tweet. It goes on for like the rest of the tweet. I don't know what it said. I just stopped reading after that. And I was just
if you saw my face just now.
And I was just like, what do you...
What?
What?
Like, no, thanks.
It was like...
Unsubscribing.
It was the most like bizarre like take I've seen.
Anybody can wear the mask.
That's the point.
Exactly.
Of Spider-Man.
Ugh. People. Anyway.
Like yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
But you know what I do love? Is love interests.
That you do.
You like that? You like that? No, that was forced. I'm so sorry. So speaking of Felicia Hardy, in the animated series, Morbius actually dated Felicia and Black Cat. Oh, Bucky. That got Bucky's attention. Yeah, Black Cat, huh? Infamous love interest of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, which we'll talk about a little later. But otherwise, there's one. There's only been one, and there's only one that's notable, and that's Martine Bancroft.
Look at that.
Look at that coinky dink. So in the film Morbius itself, Martine is portrayed by Adria Arjona.
Great.
Or Adria Arjona. Sorry. I don't want to get too crazy with the finessing of the accents because what if I'm completely wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what if it's really Adria Arjona? Yeah. like my bad. But she's a beautiful lady. And I think she described Martine herself as the smart one in the room. And so Martine does have this sort of presence throughout the entire film that's
agree.
I'm a capable, self-assured woman. I don't need you to justify anything.
Like, and I think the first what I noticed that was on the boat where the security guy came in. He's like, "Hey, miss," and then she's like, "It's a doctor, actually."
Nurse, because I think she called her a nurse.
And he's like, "It's doctor," and I'm like,
actually. Yeah.
You let them know, girl.
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
And I like that they also kind of reaffirmed that title when they would regard each other, when Morbius and Martine would regard each other, because he would be like, "Okay, doctor," and she'd be like, "Okay, doctor," and they're just like, "Yeah, we doctors." I
we
really
have
appreciate
$1 million
that.
of debt in between us, babe.
Exactly. God. And so apparently, Andrea, she based her performance on AOC.
Huh.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay.
Strong, powerful.
Yeah.
Love that.
Like,
outspoken,
doesn't
firm.
take it. Yeah. She
Love
doesn't take
that.
it from anybody. She's like, no. I'm going to command this room.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do my thing.
Love that.
Love it. And so in the books, which is, speaking of her title, she was originally Morbius' secretary.
God, it's so like it's so
such a thing of the 70s.
Yeah.
It's such a thing of the 70s.
Secretary.
She's a secretary and then becomes the girlfriend, and it's like, nah. We're not going to play that, which is why I appreciate the doctor aspect so much. What's interesting about in the books, again, back to the origin story and how Martine and Emil and Morbius are on the ship and he's going through these motions. In the comics, after all that went down, Martine didn't get a coma. She wasn't drawn into a coma like she was in the movie. Like she got assaulted and she basically got head trauma. And so in the comics, it doesn't quite go down like that. It's like literally she was asleep during the whole thing in her own bunker, and Morbius was like, I can't harm her, and he like jumps off the ship.
Oh my God.
And so he just abandoned ship quite literally.
Shoot, okay.
And so she's unscathed. And so in the comics, she goes and looks through all the clues as to what happened, and she's the one that found Emil. Didn't understand what happened to him, but just that he had died, and then finds like notes and stuff that Michael had aboard the ship, some of which included letters to Reed Richards.
Wow.
So she goes and she visits the Fantastic Four, and she's like, hey, I don't understand what's happening. Morbius is missing, and so like then that adds the chapter in my brain of like, Imagine John Krasinski and Emily Blunt.
Oh man.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happens in the books. But Martine in the comics is also quite interesting because after his transformation, a little similarly to the film, she becomes very fascinated with the idea that he's a vampire. And so she's kind of more obsessed with it because she's fascinated with the fact that, he has all these powers and he's essentially immortal and all that kind of stuff, to the point that she wants to become a vampire.
Whoa.
So she's more exclusively going for it. Whereas the one in the movie, I feel, is just like almost very much afraid of him.
Like, yeah, I would say afraid, but also be like, I don't know. She doesn't know how she feels about it yet. But she's also like, I want to help you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, of course, there is the benefit of the doubt that they're not romantically linked immediately in the film. Whereas in the comics, they're dating and all that good stuff. They're already established as a couple.
Got it. Okay.
And so Martine in the books is more like, I want to become a vampire so I can spend the rest of my life with
you.
Yeah, for eternity.
Love that.
And all that, romanticizing of all that stuff. And so, like I mentioned earlier, she dies and then she's brought back to life again. But when she's revived, she's essentially a shell of what she used to be. So her soul is gone.
Oof.
She's just a vampire that's
in that body.
Yeah, and she's just like, I'm a vampire, but she doesn't love and she doesn't feel the same way that she did as a human, which is like the price. That's the price. That's what happens.
That's the price you pay.
Yeah, it's the price you pay, love. And so, to make matters worse, she eventually dies at the hands of not only Spider-Man, but Morbius himself.
Of course.
Love hurts.
Yeah.
And versus...
No! It should have been me.
Whereas, of course, in the film, spoiler alert, Martine is abducted by Milo, brought to this rooftop where Morbius glides to find her. She's already bleeding, dying.
Yeah.
This is the part that I do not remember. Was she already bitten by Milo, or was it something else?
I don't know if she was
bitten?
right? Like she was already
Because if she
dying.
was, yeah, if she was bitten, like she would have been dead already, right? Because I don't think Milo would have like killed her and like used her blood type
Right.
of thing. I think he just wanted to kill her.
He just wanted to kill her. Yeah, and I agree.
And enough to the point where he had time.
Yeah,
Where Michael had time to say goodbye or whatever.
right.
But then she bites his lip.
Yes, and she gets those delicious bat enzymes from that very awkward but also like weirdly sensual exchange.
Yeah.
And then he bites her on the neck, which I thought was an interesting thing for him to do. But she does say to kind of
Like she
even
gave
the
him
feel.
permission.
Yeah, she was like, make it count for
Yeah.
something.
But first, let me get your blood, and then you can kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is like interesting. It's like, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
So Martine has perished in the films, but if you see the movie, she's in the stinger, or not even the stinger, at the end of the
It's
main.
in the film.
It's in
Yeah,
film.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
before the credits roll, and she is seen reawakening.
As a vampire.
As a vampire. So sequel.
Talk about a power couple. You know?
Well, we'll see. We'll see if she takes any attributes like her comic book counterpart, and
Yeah.
is she going to be the same Martine anymore? Is she still going to care about her cat? That's very important.
It's also
to me.
true. That's very
Her
important.
cat.
Yeah.
Oh, cat.
Yeah.
So speaking of vampires, pop quiz. This is a loosey-goosey one. Like, again, we're taking it really easy on you
You take
today.
a steak and you stab it through the heart. That's how you kill a vampire. Oh.
Well, no, because you can't kill Morbius that way. He's not as...
Well, I'm going with the tropes here. You know, I'm not talking about Michael specifically.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so speaking of vampires. Vampire. I keep saying it like that. I don't know why.
Vampiro tacos.
Vampire. Do you think you can name at least 4 vampires in the Marvel universe?
Okay.
And this is not counting Dracula, so you cannot use Dracula.
Like, wait, Marvel Universe, like
Movies and comics, if any, if you know any.
Oh.
And I've actually mentioned one in another episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That is an unlikely one. But go for it.
Holy Marvel. Okay. Well, Blade.
Yep. Ding.
Oh, thank God. At least I got that going for me, guys.
Yeah, you got that.
Okay, so Blade. Wow. Marvel. Wait, come on, Geoffrey. Oh my lordy, Michael Jordy. That's not Morbius?
That is not Morbius. Not Morbius and not Dracula. Dracul.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I should know this, but this is when I hate I'm put on the spot because then nothing ever comes to my head at that exact time. But Blade.
Yes. You're like Blade.
Yeah.
Blade.
Blade 2
And Blade.
and Blade 3.
Well, this is the messed up part because 2 of them are in Blade and Blade 2 or Blade 3.
Of course. Of course they are.
If you'd only seen all 3 of these
Oh
films.
my God. I was literally, how old was I at that time?
Oh God. 1989 was 1998. Sorry.
1998, the first Blade? Mm-hmm. I was 4.
Jesus.
So I don't think I was able to watch rated R movies at that time,
oh my
you know?
gosh. Yeah, I don't even want to say how old I was already. Let's just say I was pretty much old enough to drive.
Okay.
God.
I was old enough to drive a Jeep.
I don't
truck,
think you were. I think
like
you were,
the mini ones, maybe.
You were barely
With assistance.
allowed to play with Duplos.
I mean, like I said, 1998 was a blur for me.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Blade.
Okay. We've established Blade.
You know what? I'm gonna have to.
You can tap out?
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay. So, other Marvel vampires include, but are not limited to, Deacon Frost,
Yeah,
who was the enemy. He was the adversary in the Blade
I
film.
do remember that name.
Yeah,
I never
Deacon
would have remembered
Frost.
it. Yeah.
There was also Hannibal King. I don't remember he was portrayed by Ryan Reynolds in the third Blade Trinity
Is
movie.
that who Ryan Reynolds played? I know Ryan Reynolds was in the Blade Trinity movie.
Oh, he was so good.
I just never knew. Like,
he was so good. He was. That's the first movie that I distinctly remember looking at Ryan Reynolds and being like, dang, because he was ripped in that movie.
Yeah.
He was ripped in that film. He was no longer Van Wilder, and although I just can't remember because I honestly have not seen Blade 3, let alone any of the Blades.
I heard it got
since
crazy.
the early 2000s.
I heard it got crazy.
Yeah. And it did. Jessica Biel is in it too, and she was fantastic. Yeah, she was great. Abigail Whistler, I think. But anyway, yeah, I'm not sure if Ryan got bit or became a vampire in Blade Trinity, but Hannibal King, the comic book character, does become a vampire at one point. And then, of course, some others include Lilith, who was the daughter of Dracula.
Yeah.
Lilith.
Nope.
And then a character named Zarus, as well as Baron Blood, who's basically like, he looks like Wolverine and a human bat put together.
Jesus.
A character named Varney, Dracula, even though I said he doesn't really count. And then the little unlikely one that I did mention very, very briefly, I think in our mini Marvel, Jubilee. She becomes a vampire at one point, and it was very interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
And then she adopted a baby. It's a big thing. But yeah, those are the vampires.
Yeah. Like I said, I would have guessed all those other ones.
Yeah. So let's talk about aesthetics of the vampire. I wrote in my notes, what's red, black, and white all over? Morbius. So like I mentioned at
Makes
the top of the
sense.
show. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned at the top of the show, I mean, you do see what he looks like. He's just lots of black, lots of white, lots of red, or a little red. And he has these stages of vampirism. And so he looks like his normal self, and then there's a version where he's a little more bat-nosed.
Yeah.
In the comics, it's interesting, at least when it comes to the 70s ones, they kind of like purposefully made Morbius like unattractive.
Okay.
To the point where he kind of looks like Batty in a way before, even though he's not Morbius himself.
Yeah.
It's very literal at times. See, like here you can see it a little bit right there.
Yeah.
That's him there, and then
yeah. See it on the bottom.
and
Yeah.
then there he's changing already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
See, there's that vampire stuff I was talking about.
Yeah.
He's like got his arms crossed and he's laying on the
Oh,
floor.
yeah.
As for the film, the costumes designer for the film was Cindy Evans. Her work includes Memento, 13, Atomic Blonde. And I don't want to say that there's not too much in terms of costumes for Morbius in the movie, but he does have quite a few outfits. They're all black, aside his like doctoral coat.
Yeah.
But he's like in black sweats half the time, and he's shirtless half the time, and then we don't really get a sense of any kind of outfit until the very last arc of the film, act of the film.
Yeah, because he's mostly like in like a hoodie type of thing. But,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Throughout the
And then the prison cell outfit,
the orange jumpsuit.
the orange jumpsuit. Yeah. The last act is pretty much it, and I think that's the closest one resembling what we do see in the comics and in the card art, where it's kind of like, and it's represented also in the coloration that they used for promotion materials. So the promotion materials were like that fuchsia and kind of
and
turquoise,
and
blue.
like a deep red.
Yeah, like it's like
yeah.
It's like they pulled it from the RGB and then they made it more like, I don't want to use the word modern, but it is kind of like a modern tone where it's a more playful color. And so I feel like the only time that we really see a very reminiscent of the comic book Morbius is when he's about to fight Milo, and you see the kind of fuchsia red of his coat.
Yeah.
And he's got his hair down because he does have it up for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he looks most like the character in the first boat scene and at the very end. Not that he doesn't throughout the movie, but as far as his outfit goes.
Yeah.
What did you think about like all of the CGI and his
the
look,
vampire
his
face?
look? Yeah.
I thought it works. I mean, you know, it's always like, you know, when you bring like these comic book characters to, especially like characters like, you know, you bring it to the big screen, you know, it's always like, oh, how are you going to make it look realistic in that specific world? And I thought it made sense. Like it looked good. It wasn't like over the top. It was, you know, it was enough to be like, oh, he's transformed and that's a vampire, you know, person right there.
I was super impressed because I remember early on, you know, I was kind of nerding out and I would be like, what is he gonna look like?
Yeah, right.
I'd ask questions and I remember, you know, very fondly actually, Emma was like, oh yeah, he's gonna have this vampiric look. He's gonna go through these stages. There's going to be essentially 3 versions of him where he's just Michael Morbius and then he's a little more vampiric and then a full on, like he's a freaking pseudo vampire. Which is exactly what you see not only in the poster art, but also in the trailer and the film, of course. I agree. I think they did it pretty well. I know some people were griping about like there just being in general too much CGI in the film.
Sure.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that because have you seen Batman versus Superman or Man of Steel? Especially, I think it was Man of Steel, that fight with Zod at the end is just like, what the? But like, I think I understand what people are saying or complaining about in that because like the treatment, for instance, of the powers and how they're expressing the powers.
I get it.
I think that's what people are talking about. Do you agree?
I mean, this is okay.
Post-production talk.
No, it's not even. It's just like people love to complain about things, man.
That's the hard truth.
If you go into something you're gonna hate it no matter what it looks like or what it is. You've already like
if people have already convinced you you're not going to like it.
If people are convinced themselves that they're not gonna like it because of whatever reason, then it's just like, well then you have nothing else to say then kind of thing. I mean, sure, like make fun of the CGI, make fun of the story, make fun of whatever you want. It's just like, dude, it's all creative choices. They have the filmmakers have to create and set up this world, scene, the story on screen. And who actually knows like what vampiric powers look like?
Exactly.
It's, you know, there's
like,
concept
how do you
art.
translate that?
You know, like it probably went through multiple ways to show like you know Morbius is like powers visually. But then now even the harder part is there's 2 vampires in the story.
Exactly.
So how are you going to distinguish the same powers from 2 different people? You know? So I thought it was pretty clear on like who was who, like when they were fighting against each other, Milo and Michael. The CGI was it's just a comic book film.
I agree.
Like I think we talked about that. You know, it's just it is your, you know, tentpole comic book film tropes, you know, but also having its own flair, like for what it is, because it is an original origin story for this new character we've never seen on screen before.
Exactly.
So
I think they did some interesting treatments because when it comes to that sort of time-lapsey speed and the translation of speed and how they're treating it, like with the Flash, for instance, and Quicksilver or Peter Maximoff, you know, and how they slowed down everything around them in the environment, and then they to kind of convey that feeling of speed for those characters. Or like in Wonder Woman, when they show Diana like skidding across the floor and she pulls out the lasso and, you know, it gets to a slow point, but then it speeds up, and they do all these things, these gimmicked effects to make it look a certain way, to make it seem like, oh, imagine like the power that they're doing, but like by the naked eye, you can only see it like in a second. So I feel like with Morbius, they were really trying to like be like, these guys are so fast that you cannot see them. It's like a blur. And then they were kind of colorating, using this coloration on them. To kind of, I felt it was more artistic than it was literal. I feel like people took it too literally.
Yeah.
Like they were like, oh, why is it fuchsia? Why do they have fuchsia? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it wasn't intended to be like you were literally seeing that color.
I like the sequence when he moved like incredibly fast.
Yeah.
I like those.
The boat scene.
Like the boat scene,
Yeah.
and then or when he's traveling through the city. So I did actually like those. It reminded me a little bit about like some how Nightcrawler moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great
But
one.
it wasn't how it was for Nightcrawler.
Right.
Because Nightcrawler would just poof smoke end up here.
Yeah.
With Morbius, it was almost like a fluid motion trail.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I feel like it was an interesting thought because it's almost like taking all of those character studies of motion and putting them all into one and then adding a pinch of Daredevil.
Yeah.
Because he had the way of like his radar senses that were similar to Morbius's in that like you hear the
Yes.
and then like it's not like in a game because that was very much like an Assassin's Creed thing where you hear that you press R or you toggle on your R3 and then you see like the imbue of the escape.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think it was supposed to be literal, but they're like they're conveying it in a way that like you can understand it better.
Yeah, it's just
and
so
I liked
hard.
that a lot
hard
too.
nowadays when you have so many examples in media or whatever, entertainment, to where you can pull from. So like you think like that's how it should be, or you think how it should look, and it's just like, well, everyone has their own opinion or own creative like look on it. So it's just like you just gotta take it, for what it is. Like appreciate for what's given. Yeah. And go from there.
Yeah, I agree. And so speaking of the character and like how we have not necessarily seen him in other films, but I will say he had a very brief cameo in a deleted scene in Blade, the first Blade.
Really?
He did. And so this was, again, 1998, starring Wesley Snipes as Blade, Eric Brooks. So I had to look it up again today just to make sure I did not imagine it. But there's an alternate ending of the first Blade film. So in the theatrical cut, at the end of the film, it's a snowy scape and then I was going to say Morbius. Blade is essentially hunting Russian vampires by the end of that movie. Nice. And so it's pretty cool. It's very samurai-like almost, and it's very like, if you know anything about Blade, it's like spot on. Yeah. But in the alternate ending, he and I believe the character Vanessa, climb up to a rooftop and I think Vanessa was also dealing with the vampiric issues throughout the film and he saves her or whatever. And so they go onto the rooftop and they're having this moment of like basking in the sunlight. Yeah. And then you see this like trench coated individual on another rooftop, like down the street. Wow. And Blade, like she says something and Blade turns around and I think it was bleeped out or the sound didn't catch whatever it was, and then he goes, and then he unsheaths his blade, and that's the end of the movie. And so that was supposedly Morbius. It was supposed to be Morbius, which is funny because I think Jared's looks far more like the comic book character than that one. Okay. Because that one, you can't even see you can't distinguish his face at all. He's just kind of got like I think his hair's kind of pulled up, or it's in a ponytail or something. He's got a big trench coat that's wafting in the wind, and his face is just like covered in a way. But it's an ominous figure and again, like even the director, Stephen Norrington, he confirmed like, that was supposed to be Morbius. And funny enough, that was also Stephen Norrington as Morbius. Wow. So the director of the film was portraying Morbius. But, like much like the MCU, they ultimately could not use him because he was a Sony property. Yes. That belongs in the Spider-Man universe. Wow. So since 1998, even then they couldn't use him. Sheesh. So despite New Line Cinema and their efforts, another character that bit the dust, no pun intended, and he wasn't seen until 2022. Crazy. Yeah. Crazy. So crazy. So like I mentioned earlier, I kind of wanted to touch on the iconic 1993 Amazing Spider-Man series version of this character, just a little bit. He was voiced by an actor named Nick Jameson, and this version of the character itself was actually quite iconic. As little as he was in the series. He started as an ESU student and a rival to Peter Parker, of course. He also had this notably thick accent. If you haven't heard it or you haven't seen the series, go watch it on YouTube right now. Just check out a clip or two. And long story short, he essentially comes into the fold by stopping a robber that was trying to steal Felicia Hardy's purse. And so as a result, the two get close and then even closer to the point that they actually start dating, and Parker kind of gets jealous because of this. But similarly to Parker, Morbius gets bitten by a radioactive bat, more or less a mutant bat that is, from his experiments. And it's kind of similar to the comic book canon in that way. But the most iconic part about this version of the character is that he had these things on the palms of his hands that were referred to as hand suckers. Funny enough, the writer's room came up with these things to not frighten the kids, because like the idea of biting a neck, like a vampire sucking blood from a human's neck was like apparently too scary for the crowds, the kids at that time, the audience.
Yeah.
And so the writer's room came up with these suction cups in the well of his hands to quote unquote absorb plasma, or as cracked.com beautifully stated, multiple puckering buttholes. And so which brings us to our near last but not least, almost was. Any guesses whatsoever?
None.
That's right. There was none.
Oh.
There were none. There were no options for this character.
I feel like every episode we're just leaning into more.
Yeah.
Just like there's only one other person, two other. No,
Yeah,
and now there's just like nobody.
There was not even a hopeful list. There was no fan casting list. There was nothing. It was literally for and by Jared Leto.
Love that.
Yeah. And so I wanted to quote director Daniel Espinosa and what he said about Jared. And he says, Jared was the only actor that could really play the part of Morbius. That wasn't really a choice. It was a predestination. Jared is a beautiful actor to work with. He comes to set fully prepared, completely immersed in his character. He's become known for his approach to his characters, but it was truly surprising to see how much emotionally he could wrest out of Dr. Michael Morbius. He has a strong dedication, beginning to end, and more than just an actor. He's a colleague, a partner.
Wow.
I was like, damn.
Poetic.
So start to finish, it was always his.
Love that.
Yeah, it's kind of
if he's invested, he's invested, you know?
Exactly. So I appreciate that. But yeah, like I said, I enjoy his Morbius far more than I've enjoyed many of his portrayals, including Joker. I think if I had to choose one, Morbius. I love his Morbius compared to Joker.
Yeah.
And so I would love to see more of him as this character. I think he does serve him well.
Yeah.
I think he's
I would
very fit
agree.
for it.
You know?
Yeah, I think he just needs a solid shot. A solid shot.
Yeah. Just a chance.
I stick to my guns, not bias at all. Like if this had been a Marvel Studios film and they took their liberties with it and they introduced it the way that they would have done it, oh man, I feel like it would have been like so great and such, like, because we have not had a vampire movie in forever, right?
Yeah.
Maybe since Blade Trinity. I feel like Underworld was even ages ago.
I mean, yeah.
Right? Oh man. Well, it's okay. Morbius is still enjoyable.
Yeah.
So if you feel like watching it, go watch it.
Yes.
And so aside that, suggested reading, once again, I'm going to refer back. Amazing Spider-Man number 699.1 in 1999, which leads to the more modern solo title for the character and is also incredibly reminiscent of the film. And so like, honestly, it's like panel to picture. It really is. It's like whoever did the outline for the film, that was a resource by far. Another one, Morbius, the Living Vampire by, here we go. Here's a list of names. Vida Ayala, Marcelo Ferreira, Roberto Poggi, and Dono Sanchez Almara. Rise of the Midnight Suns, which spanned various titles. So that included Ghost Rider, Spirits of Vengeance, Morbius, Darkhold, and Night Stalkers. And then last but not least, the compilation Vampire Tales, which includes a bunch of the 1970s stuff because, yeah, it's good. It's good classic stuff. So yeah, let's see on the show.
Oof. That's a lot.
Is that a lot?
A lot. I mean, for a character that we've finally seen on screen.
Yeah.
Now that we have like this visual reference, live action to compare to the comics. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
He's a great character, you know?
Ooh, yeah.
Like you said, it's been a while since we've seen a vampire based character on screen. So
suck it, Twilight.
sorry to the Twilight fans. I never watched it, got into it.
I too was a Twilight fan, so I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, I never got into it.
No, it's okay. You're okay with it. you don't need it. If you got some days to kill, I will say during peak pandemic, I binged the entire series.
Jeez, I see the memes all the time. I'll say that.
But that's the thing. It is very funny in retrospect. Like and there is a version. I don't want to detour too hard.
Yeah.
There is a version, I think, of the first film where Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart did like the what do you call the director's commentary.
Oh.
It is incredible because they self-roast the entire time.
Oh, it's hilarious.
It's incredible.
Love that.
Oh, so good. Love a good vampire story. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Oh man, yeah.
So next episode, Jeff, what are we gonna do?
We're doing it.
What are we doing, Jeff?
We are covering the 3 Spider-Mans.
The big 3.
Yes, might as well run on this train of Sony. And Dai just got her the physical copy of No Way Home.
Yes, I did.
With all the bonus content.
The bonus content.
So we are both gonna watch the 20 extra minutes of all Peters.
Is it only 20 of the Peters, but it's 80 of the entire thing?
80 minutes of extra features and 20 plus minutes of Peter 1, Peter 2, and Peter 3.
I'm so excited.
So we're going to watch that and we're going to cover all 3 Peters because they deserve it.
I agree.
Just them 3.
Yay.
Yeah,
it's going to be good.
So I'm excited to discuss all 3 of them and we will have a hot debate on who is the best one.
Oh no! This is like another a challenge for us because like I feel like every time we even talk about Spider-Man, it always comes up. But I'm gonna lie for it. I'm gonna be like, nope. Andrew Garfield.
Yeah,
Andrew Garfield.
I mean, we've covered Peter Parker before, obviously, and Spidey before, but we are
Tom Holland.
But we are literally covering all 3.
Toby.
All 3 on screen Spider-Man.
I can't decide. It's gonna suck, but it's gonna be great.
All 3 Peter Parker Spider-Man on screen.
Peter Parker.
Sorry, we want to,
Parker.
Yeah.
Parker.
Where's my photos of Spider-Man?
More about the entire episode. We are Groot. Salute to Claire, Robin, Katie, Tyler, Ariel, Melanie, Ashley, the Arachnid, Joe, Liz, Jenny, Ed, Nats, Andrew, and Laura.
Woo!
Follow us on social at STRKCNTRST.
Yes.
And if you like what you hear, please review, rate, and hit the subscribe button.
Yes.
Come on, I know you're lurking.
Please.
I see you.
We need to feed our families. I'm just kidding. We don't. But I mean, you can still hit it though. Still hit the button. It's right there.
Just hit it.
But yeah, like we said, we will see you in the next one.
We'll see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Who the hell are you, man?
I am Venom. I'm just kidding. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.